They have to stand facing the mirror for 10 hours every night. Even when they're exhausted, they don't dare to close their eyes and rest, and they must always maintain a calm expression, not daring to show the slightest panic, because there's a group of mysterious alien creatures gathering in front of the mirror to imitate their actions. If anyone tries to resist, these monsters will tear them to pieces. Someone once tried to escape this strange forest during the day, but no matter which direction he ran, he would eventually return to the starting point. And at night, those monsters will swarm out, tracking the escapee by scent, and cruelly kill him. However, Belle is unwilling to continue living like this. She's had enough of this life of fear and anxiety, but every time she wants to take action, she is stopped by the experienced old woman. Because she has lived here for 20 years, she knows the ferocity of those monsters very well. Once they are provoked, everyone will face the doom of being killed. But Belle only agreed superficially. When she went out to find food during the day, she would make marks on the trees. Returning to the cabin at night, she would pose in front of the mirror to please those monsters. After countless days and nights of exploration and observation, Belle finally knew the surrounding terrain very well. So this day she rushed out of the cabin with a bird. "Where are you going?" "Home. You can't get out." "I want to try." But to Belle's surprise, this time the old woman did not stop her as usual. This filled her heart with doubt, so she ran all the way along the marks she had secretly made before, hoping to escape the forest before nightfall. And so she ran tirelessly, until a clearing vaguely appeared ahead. However, just when she thought she was finally out of the forest, reality dealt her a heavy blow. As far as the eye could see, there were endless mountain ranges stretching to the sky. It was then that Belle realized, even if she ran her legs off, it was impossible to escape this place in a day. Despair spread in her heart. The figure of the old woman suddenly appeared behind her. "You're not the only one who wants to escape. We've all tried it before, but we all failed." Belle had no choice. She could only follow the old woman back. After this failure, she gradually accepted the reality of being trapped, and began to obediently follow those rules. However, on one occasion when going out to find food, Belle was teamed up with the youngest, Tyrell. Throughout the journey, Belle constantly complained about the old woman, as she always acted old and bossed them around with a commanding tone. Belle had a flash of inspiration and came up with a plan. She also started echoing Tyrell, speaking ill of the old woman. After successfully getting closer to Tyrell, she proposed a bold hypothesis. They had never actually seen the monsters. It was all just a lie fabricated by the old woman. A hint of realization flashed in Tyrell's eyes after hearing this. So, driven by curiosity, the two secretly went to the place where the monsters were hiding. Facing the deep and mysterious cave, Belle had no fear whatsoever, but was instead unusually excited. "Don't you want to know what they look like?" In the end, both decided to take a risk. Tyrell was responsible for holding the rope at the cave entrance, while Belle went deep into the bottom of the cave to investigate. She moved cautiously downwards, and nothing unexpected happened along the way. When she finally reached the bottom of the cave, she was surprised to find it empty. There was no sign of a monster at all. Instead, there were many tools used by humans on a daily basis scattered around. Belle didn't think much about it. He picked out some things that might be useful, and used a rope to transport them up. Although he had collected some items, Belle was still not satisfied and wanted to go deeper. But just then, a strange noise suddenly echoed within the cave. Belle frantically called out to Tyrell. At that moment, a hand slowly emerged from the cave, but as soon as it touched the sunlight, it began to emit puffs of white smoke. At this critical moment, Tyrell hurriedly threw down the rope. Belle was then able to escape danger. However, when they brought these things back to the cabin, they were questioned by the old woman. "Where did you go? What did you see?" "Nothing, really." Little did they know that their actions would soon bring them unimaginable trouble. However, what they brought back played a big role. Tyre connected an old camera to a monitor, and made it into a simple camera, hoping to see the true face of the monster. What was strange was, that the screen was still blank late into the night. Just when everyone thought the monster wouldn't appear tonight, there was a sudden heavy knock on the door. Then a human leg appeared on the monitor. Before everyone could react, the curly-haired girl stood up abruptly, as if drawn to the steel or by some kind of magic. At this moment, a man's voice came from outside the door. "Honey, open the door quickly. She's back." Seeing this, the old woman immediately stood in front of the door. She tried hard to dissuade the curly-haired girl from believing, because it is impossible for anyone to be alive here. This is obviously a trick of the monster, but the curly-haired girl didn't seem to hear it. Her husband went out alone a week ago to find help, and then never came back. Now her husband is finally back. Does she want him to wait outside to die? Just as she was about to open the door, the old woman suddenly thought of a way to verify identity. That is to ask some questions that both husband and wife are familiar with. In order to dispel everyone's doubts, the curly-haired girl finally had to agree. So she asked about an agreement between the two. But time passed by every minute, but there was no response from outside the door. He's not right. Monsters don't let people live. The person outside is a monster. With everyone's joint efforts, the curly-haired girl finally woke up from her daze. However, this completely enraged the monsters outside the door. They hurriedly stood back in front of the mirror. But this time, the mirror seemed to have lost its effect. Not only did the monsters not stop attacking, but they became even more frenzied. They started hitting the mirror violently. A series of violent vibrations came from the room, making everyone tremble with fear, thinking they wouldn't escape this time. But just as the mirror was about to be shattered, the monsters suddenly stopped. Clearly, this was just a warning. But the old woman, a survivor, was still furious. She came to Belle and questioned where the things he brought back during the day came from. Belle no longer concealed anything. He could only tell her the truth of the matter. The old woman was instantly stunned upon learning the truth. They hastily threw all those things back early in the morning, hoping this would quell the monster's anger. But after this incident, she became wary of Belle and Tyr. So every time she went out to find food, she would deliberately separate them, to prevent them from doing anything out of line again. But this approach made Tyr feel resentful. His arguments with the old woman increased. Finally, one day, Belle and the curly-haired girl heard a terrified scream. They immediately rushed to the sound, only to find the old woman tied up by Tyr. "What are you doing?" "He's gone mad. We need to tie her up quickly." Changing to our rules now. Before the words finished, Tyr strode away. Seeing this, Belle hurried forward to untie the old woman. The two dared not delay for a moment and immediately ran towards the cabin, but found the door was locked tightly by Tyr. No matter how they pleaded, Tyr remained unmoved. And at this moment, the sky gradually darkened. Seeing that the monster was about to appear, the old woman seemed to suddenly remember something. She quickly dragged Belle and fled into the forest. Soon they hid under a pile of dead wood. It turned out that this was a hiding place prepared by the old woman in advance. These rotten dead trees could mask their scent. At the same time, in the room, Tyr pulled the curly-haired girl to stand in front of the glass, quietly waiting for the arrival of the monster, completely disregarding the safety of the two people outside the door. Belle's heart was pounding, and she was extremely frightened. Before long, the monster did appear above their heads. Fortunately, they didn't find the two people under the dead wood. Belle held her breath, afraid of making a sound. But what they didn't expect was, when all the monsters gathered in front of the mirror, Tyr in the room suddenly shouted loudly, "They're not here." They ran away. The monsters outside immediately scattered, beginning to search for them. The old woman seized the opportunity, pulling Belle quickly back to the front of the cabin. However, Tyr still refused to open the door. In this critical moment, Belle hurriedly said that he had already made marks in the forest and found an escape route, guaranteeing to lead everyone to safety. This trick worked. Tyr quickly opened the door, but as soon as the two entered, the old woman angrily walked up to Tyr, planning to teach the young man a lesson. But just then, Belle suddenly heard movement outside. So the group quickly stood side by side in front of the mirror, in order to get everyone to follow the command. The old woman finally revealed the secret she had hidden for many years. It turns out he was not only a scientist, but also voluntarily came to this place. The purpose is to study alien creatures in depth. But now it's too late to say anything. It looks like they're about to break in. They hurriedly pushed the table to block the door, but accidentally discovered a secret on the floor. There's something underneath. How do we open this thing? I don't know what to do. The noise outside is getting louder and louder, and they're about to break in. At this critical moment, Ty quickly found an iron bucket and smashed it frantically against the floor. Fortunately, the iron ore above is very thin. It quickly twisted and deformed under the heavy blow. Belle saw this and hurried forward to help. As the ground broke, a hidden hole was revealed. Tyre quickly flipped the switch. A tunnel entrance was exposed before their eyes. They didn't have time to think and hurriedly plunged into the tunnel. At the same time, the table used to hold off the monster was about to break. Just as the old woman was about to enter the tunnel, the glass in the room suddenly shattered. Fortunately, at the last moment, the old woman closed the tunnel entrance in time, allowing them to escape unharmed. But before they could breathe a sigh of relief, they were shocked by the sight under the tunnel. Not only was there a whole shelf of food, but also various practical tools. Obviously, someone had lived here for a long time. At this time, Belle found an old computer. She tried moving the mouse. Unexpectedly, the computer could still be started. But to their disappointment, this computer cannot connect to the internet. But they found something even more valuable in the computer. Hundreds of small videos. They thought they could feast their eyes. Just as they opened the video with anticipation, they found it was actually an old man's vlog. But as the video played, the fear in their hearts grew stronger. The old man was actually a professor. He came here specifically to study the alien creatures here. Initially, his research was normal. He simply observed and understood the habits of these creatures. But the professor quickly discovered that these monsters came outside the cabin every night to imitate human behavior, seemingly wanting to integrate into human life. In order to conduct more in-depth research, the professor was no longer satisfied with observing from inside the cabin, and began to use fraudulent means to lure people from nearby towns as bait, sacrifice these lives to them, and he actually managed to capture a monster and imprison it in the cellar. When everyone saw what the professor had done, they were all too shocked to speak. They never imagined the professor would be so mad. At this point, everyone dared not continue watching. They stood up and prepared to flee, but Belle was driven by curiosity. She couldn't help but click on the last video. Unexpectedly, this video actually had a way to escape this forest. It turned out that the professor had planned it long ago. He put a small boat on the riverbed at boundary 134. Just follow the direction the birds are flying, and you can successfully leave this forest. Belle was very excited to hear this, because she happened to have a parrot in her hand. At the thought of escaping this terrifying place, everyone was so excited that they couldn't sleep. Tyra and the curly-haired girl were even more excited and started dancing. The next day, they couldn't wait to open the door. They saw that the whole house had been completely destroyed by monsters, but they had no time to worry about that. They immediately embarked on their escape. Fortunately, Belle had made marks before. They followed the marks and traveled east. They quickly found boundary point number 134. Belle then released the parrot. Everyone followed it closely and continued forward. The weather is unpredictable. The originally clear sky suddenly became windy. Then it started to pour. What's worse, this kind of weather without sunlight is when monsters come out. They didn't dare to delay at all, sprinting forward with all their strength. At the same time, a large number of monsters poured out, approaching them at an alarming rate. Fortunately, they reached the lake at a crucial moment. They dared not linger for even a moment. They immediately followed the river, searching for the boat's location. Although the journey was full of dangers, they eventually succeeded in finding the small boat left by the professor. But just then, Curly suddenly noticed that Tyler was missing. They were just about to turn around and look for him when Tyler appeared behind them, dragging a person along. Curly's eyes widened because Tyler was dragging her husband. She could tell at a glance that her husband was no longer human. But because the distance was too great, Tyler couldn't hear Curly's shouts at all, and ultimately became a sacrifice to the monster. Belle and his party quickly came back to their senses, and quickly boarded the boat and rowed towards the center of the lake. But they hadn't rowed far when they were attacked by a large number of alien monsters. They thought they were doomed this time, but surprisingly found that these monsters didn't seem to be able to swim. They could only watch silently as they gradually moved away, letting out bursts of resentful roars. Finally, they successfully left this place. But Belle, out of curiosity, came to the professor's former office, unexpectedly discovering the truth of the matter. So she immediately found the curly-haired girl and took out some photos. It turned out that the old woman was actually the professor's wife. The curly-haired girl felt very confused about this, not understanding why the old woman would hide her identity. But what Belle said next shocked her even more. The woman in the photo. She's dead. She died of cancer decades ago. Belle guessed that the old woman might be an alien monster. Although the evidence was right in front of her, the curly-haired girl still found it hard to accept, because everything seemed so illogical. The monster is clearly afraid of sunlight, but the old woman seemed just like a normal person. But combined with the professor's insane actions in the video, Belle thought of an even more incredible possibility. Perhaps the old woman was a product of the professor and the monster. Born decades ago,